Hello, today I'm going to be talking about Mage the Ascension and the traditions of the game and the spheres that they rule over. Now this, I'm showing you, is the revised collector's edition. It has the art of Mage the Ascension, which are just reprints of pictures that you can find on the covers of other books in the interior. And you get this book with it. It's very, very, very overpriced. In the current market, I would highly suggest not buying it. It is exactly the same book as this copy of Mage the Ascension. This is revised Mage the Ascension. That book's going to cost you about $30 online, and it's an older edition of the book. Still usable, but the rules are a little more cleaned up in the newer version. This book's going to cost you more like $10. Now, Mage the Ascension is by far the most complicated of the White Wolf products. I've played the new Mage the Awakening. I think this is a far more complicated product. One of the drawbacks to it is it reads a little like a textbook. Particularly this version. It took me a long time to get through it. And once you learn it, it is a very interesting system. It's basically a bunch of building blocks for creating the universe and how that interplays through magic. What magic is the ability to use your mind to control everything that's going on around you when it gets down to its highest levels. But it's constrained by paradox, and what paradox is the consensus of individuals saying, no, that can't happen. So that is what mages fight for. The different kinds of mages. The technocracy, who serve the weaver. The Nefandi, who serve the worm. And the marauders, who serve the wild. They all want humanity as a whole to come towards their own direction. Now, in the middle of that, you have the traditions. The traditions are losing. Technocracy are winning the battle. The traditions have a lot of disadvantages against them. The technocracy are essentially all the government bodies, all the people that in all conspiracy theories rule everything. They're pretty much all the technocracy. The men in black do exist. The New World Order does exist, and they are out to find you when you start breaking the rules of reality. They'll do very bad things to you. The traditions are the Akashic Brotherhoods. Now we think of a David Carradine Kung Fu television show where the monks do weird and sometimes goofy things. That's the Akashic Brotherhood. They rule over mind, which allows people to multitask to amazing levels, but it also allows you to do your typical dominates and mental enchantments. There's quite a bit you can do with mind. They are almost all from somewhere in the Orient and from the different martial arts traditions. They even have a new skill called Do that allows them to do better than someone typically brawling. I didn't think it was handled particularly well. I don't like the Akashic Brotherhood. Moving on to the Celestial Core. Celestial Core worship the One. Music is very important to them. They are the monotheists. They are the people that become enlightened out of the Christian traditions, the Jewish tradition, and the tradition of Islam. There are a few other smaller groups and ideas they had, but we'll just leave it at that to make it not too convoluted. Their sphere of influence is Prime, and of course Prime sounds to them much like singing music typically, and that can be oriented different between characters. Now, they have a very musical take on it, but other traditions may perceive Prime differently, and Prime can manifest in a lot of different ways. Quintessence is easily detected with Prime, and quintessence is essentially magical energy, which are in cairns or nodes or freeholds, which are all the same thing. These places the supernatural are drawn to because they have the blood of the earth running through them, that spiritual resonance that pools up under the ground or inside of stone or in a cemetery. The mages with Prime can sense these things. Prime is essentially the fifth element. It is the aether, the spiritual stuff that is set aside of the true building blocks of reality. If the other elements compose the canvas, and the oils upon which the painting is made. Prime allows you to see the quintessence of the aether, which is the canvas that it's painted on, what is behind the pretty picture of reality. The next tradition are the Cult of Ecstasy. The Cult of Ecstasy are, well, as the name points out, they're ecstatic. They have tendencies to delve headlong fully into all sorts of divergence and pleasures. Many of the other traditions find them to be frivolous. They are heavily involved in anything that's going to give them that next level, that next idea of consciousness. Many of them are heavy or recreational drug users, but they play with reality and opening their own minds in many other ways besides that. The Cult of Ecstasy, I think, make great player characters. I like them. They're probably my second favorite of the traditions. Their sphere is time. Now, time can allow you to... It's not quite as free as you might think, because if you gave someone a discipline of time and just allowed them to, at high levels, do anything they wanted, your game would be completely wrecked very, very quickly. But it allows you to foresee things that are going to happen. It allows you to know what time it is, to be fully immersed in that. It allows you to take extra actions and move very quickly. And another thing about all the spheres is they can all be paired together to create effects. And you may not be able to create a certain effect because you don't have a certain sphere. The next are the Dream Speakers. Longest campaign I ever played, 7 years. Played a Dream Speaker. Played a lot of hours on the character Milton Cobb. He was a very hippie-ish, sort of a rock and roll singer, a shaman, and very, very, very fun character. I used the Baruti tradition, but I'm not going to get too much into that. That's a whole other video. Their sphere is spirit. Spirit allows you to go into the Umbra. The Umbra, basically, think of yourself looking into the mirror. Now, you can see the mirror to the right, to the left, and up and down, but there comes a point where you can't see that reflection. Now, what the Umbra is behind the mirror. Now, everything on our world is reflected in the Umbra. Now, it may be very, very different. It may be prettier or uglier. There may be things that are or aren't there, and things that have a lot of energy are going to show up more distinctly. That's not necessarily a good thing. Now, the further you get away, once you've entered the mirror, the stranger things happen, and there are entire dimensions and worlds out there which you can go in. Your game can go from being in 2011, dealing with chantry politics, dealing with the technocracy, to all of a sudden having to go into Pangea, a primordial world that may be very similar to science, but it may have nothing to do with that. You could go into a hollow world sort of environment, or something more like cyberpunk, or a place that's very dark, or a place that's a world of cartoons. All of these things, all of the ideas and imaginations that have enough resonance end up there and end up as their own places. Now, the exploration of these places is the preview of the Dream Speakers, who are very close with the spirits. They tend them, and they take good care of them almost always. And to not do so is perhaps be booted out of the tradition. The Dream Speakers are very much the noble savages, the Siberian shaman, or the Native American medicine man, the Australian tribal healer. All of these are examples of Dream Speakers, but there are many others, and they can be very interesting tribe. Next are the Euthanatos, and all the Dream Speakers are typically very much seen as good guys. The Euthanatos are typically seen as bad guys, the darkest of the 9 traditions. The Euthanatos sphere of magic is entropy. It allows you to control fate, anything from the luck of what cards are dealt to a certain player to if you have a heart attack right now. They have a very interesting mythology. They sort of combine a Greco-Roman, Egyptian, and Hindi philosophy, and it would be an entire video to talk about that. But many of them deal with spirits of the dead, helping them exit the state of being wraiths or ghosts and going on back into the wheel of reincarnation. They view things as being accumulated on points through life, and often are known to kill people when they think they're at their highest point, so they prevent them from degrading further. They also, many of them will go and be very active with suicide that an individual wants. They'll help that, or come to someone who is incurable and do that individual in. And of course, there are magics to cure individuals. Unfortunately, they aren't necessarily within the easiest to come by for the Euthanatos. There are also many assassins, murderers within the Euthanatos. They have their definitely darker sides, but many of them are a bit misunderstood. In fact, they do wish to help people. Next are the Order of Hermes, which are 9 or 10, depending on which edition you're going with, different sub-traditions within that. They're, think of the movie Harry Potter, and take all the silly stuff out and make them all incredibly hyper-competitive in a very corporate America sort of way, extraordinarily cutthroat, but they're divided like that into different houses with people in universities and educating the young awakened, but they are very, very, very complicated. The sphere they rule over is forces. That's everything from light to sound to fire. And you can do a lot of damage with forces. It's a sphere that gives you an extra die on combat rolls, but inside the house, many of the smaller sub-factions practice other disciplines. It's an extremely complicated house. Next are the Sons of Ether. Imagine 1910, 1920, 1890 style steampunk, and put it in the modern day. That's what they practice. They are very much technomancers and distrusted, and for good reason, by the rest of the traditions. Their sphere is matter, which only makes sense if you're making bizarre steampunk style creations, weird little robots, and other oddities. They do value education. Many of them do possess doctorates in various different fields, particularly mechanically oriented fields. They are not one of my favorite traditions. So we're going to move on to the Verbena, who I do like. Their sphere is life, which is probably the sphere any of us would want if we could have one of these in real life. You can live to be hundreds of years old and still look like you're 20, but a perfect version of yourself. Absolutely beautiful, completely muscular, trimmed up definition, cardiovascular system that works in excess, all your organs and your body functioning perfectly. They can alter all your physical stats to beyond human capacities, as well as your appearance with life. You can regrow limbs. You can cure someone of AIDS or cancer, or make a baby that's being born inside someone come out almost perfect, almost eerily so. You can also give someone diseases, and in most horrendous fashions, or make someone have a heart attack, or put a hole inside their liver, or do some really nasty stuff with life. It is by far my favorite sphere, and I think it is very interesting the ways that it works in the game. The Verbena are your neo-pagans, your pagans predominantly, and so they have an old tradition. They have a lot of those sort of trappings for their magic, and each kind of magic, each kind of tradition has their own paradigm, their own view, and their own trappings for their magic. And they use a lot of the thanes and the rods and blood and candles and all that sort of thing. But some of them can also be very dark and dangerous as well. Next are the Virtual Adepts, who are also technomancers. They are broken away from the technocracy. They aren't trusted, nor should they be. Their sphere is correspondence. Correspondence is very interesting. They typically manifest their magic through computers, but correspondence can be used, and which makes sense why they would have correspondence, because I'm here and you're there and you're watching this video. Now, if I had correspondence and I was a virtual adept, I might step out